From the outside, the Donovan family looked like the picture of small-town perfection. Their two-story white house sat neatly on the edge of Brookdale, a quiet lakeside town where everyone knew each other's names, and secrets were buried under polite smiles. Sarah Donovan, the stepmother, was known for her charm, elegant, soft-spoken, and always seen volunteering at the local church bake sales. Her husband, Robert, was a respected accountant with a reputation for honesty and precision, a man who believed in rules and family dinners at 6 sharp. And then there was Ethan, Robert's son from his first marriage, 20 years old, quiet and brilliant, studying pre-law at the local university. To anyone watching from the outside, the Donovans were the embodiment of suburban harmony. But behind the neatly trimmed hedges and pastel curtains, something dark had been festering for months, something that would soon tear the family and the town apart. It began innocently, or so it seemed, one summer evening when Robert was away on a business trip. Ethan had stayed home to work on a research paper when Sarah knocked softly on his door, asking if he could help her fix the Wi-Fi router. He followed her downstairs, and that night something shifted. A look, a lingering touch, a silence that felt heavier than words. Over the next few weeks, their stolen moments grew bolder whispers in the kitchen, glances that burned too long, and a hunger that neither of them dared to name. Ethan tried to fight it, telling himself it was wrong, that Sarah was his father's wife. But Sarah's charm was a storm, and he was caught in its pull. What began as emotional confusion spiraled into something physical, secret, and irreversible. When the affair started, Sarah told herself she loved him, that he reminded her of the youth she'd lost, the passion she no longer felt with Robert. But guilt grew inside her like poison, and soon she realized that what she was doing wasn't just immoral, it was dangerous. She had been hiding a devastating truth for years. Before marrying Robert, she had been diagnosed with HIV, a secret she kept buried under layers of denial and fear. When she discovered Ethan's growing obsession with her, she told herself she'd warn him. She'd stop it, but she didn't. The affair continued, reckless and consuming, until one night. Months later, Ethan fell ill. Fever, fatigue, and confusion drove him to the hospital, where blood tests revealed what no one could have imagined. When the doctor delivered the diagnosis, Ethan's world collapsed in on itself. The nurse's voice faded as his mind raced back to every moment, every touch, every kiss. The shame and horror hit him all at once. Sarah had known. He was sure of it. The confrontation happened in the kitchen 2 nights later. Ethan burst in, pale and trembling, the test results still clutched in his hand. "You knew," he said, voice cracking. Sarah froze, her glass slipping from her hand and shattering on the tile. "Ethan, please, listen, you knew," he screamed, his voice echoing through the house. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I never meant for this to happen." But the words sounded hollow even to her. Robert came home early that night, stepping into a storm he didn't understand. He found Ethan shaking, Sarah crying, the air thick with secrets. Within days, the truth began to seep out, first whispers, then rumors, then headlines. By the end of the week, the Donovans' perfect image was in ruins, the house surrounded by reporters and flashing cameras. But the real horror was yet to come. 2 days later, Sarah was gone. Her car was found near Brookdale Lake, the driver's door open, her purse on the passenger seat. At dawn, A fisherman spotted something floating near the Riza woman's body, pale and still, her face half hidden beneath the water. The autopsy would reveal more questions than answers, and what seemed like a tragedy of guilt would unravel into a far more sinister mystery. The morning after Sarah Donovan's disappearance, Brookdale Lake was silent, its surface covered in a thin veil of mist that glowed silver under the first light of dawn. Detective Claire Monroe stood by the shoreline, her coat pulled tight against the chill, her eyes fixed on the cluster of officers combing through reeds and driftwood. She had seen death before, too much of it, but there was something about this one that felt personal, deliberate. The fisherman who had reported the body stood nearby, his hands trembling as he described what he'd seen, a shape floating just beyond the dock, pale as the moon. When they pulled Sarah's body from the water, her face looked almost peaceful, as if she'd finally escaped something unbearable. But the bruises along her wrists and the faint cut at her temple told a different story. "Doesn't look like an accident," Claire murmured, and the coroner nodded grimly. The call to Robert Donovan came just after sunrise. He arrived, still in his office clothes from the night before, his tie, crooked eyes hollow with disbelief. "She wouldn't have done this," he kept saying, voice shaking. "She wasn't the type." Claire watched him carefully, noting every twitch, every hesitation. "When was the last time you saw her?" she asked. "2 nights ago. She went out for a walk and never came back." But the timeline didn't match. The neighbor's security camera had captured Sarah's car leaving at midnight, not dusk. Back at the Donovan house, the picture-perfect family image had cracked like glass. Ethan sat on the edge of the living room couch, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. "You think my dad had something to do with it?" he asked quietly. Claire shook her head. "I don't think anything yet, but I do think your stepmother was keeping secrets." Ethan's eyes flickered with something, fear, guilt, maybe both. She noticed a small cut on his wrist, a faint mark he quickly covered with his sleeve. "You were close to her, weren't you?" Claire asked. "She tried to be," he said, his tone distant. "But she wasn't my mother." Claire didn't push. She'd learned that silence often spoke louder than words. As she walked through the house, her flashlight skimmed across the details of a life once carefully curated: spotless counters, framed photographs of family vacations, a vase of wilted roses by the sink. Then, in Sarah's study, she found something: a locked drawer forced open, papers scattered across the floor. Among them, a hidden envelope marked "confidential." Inside were documents that didn't belong in a suburban home: legal contracts, offshore account statements, and a handwritten note that read, "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident." That night, the town buzzed with rumors. Some said Sarah had run away before she was killed. Others whispered about an affair, money laundering, and betrayal. At the station, Claire spread the files across her desk, connecting the dots. Robert's financial firm had been under investigation months earlier for embezzlement, a case that mysteriously disappeared when Sarah married him. Maybe she knew more than she let on. Maybe she'd tried to expose someone. Claire lit another cigarette, watching the smoke twist toward the ceiling. The phone on her desk rang, jolting her. "Detective Monroe," she answered. The voice on the other end was shaky, male, young. "It's Ethan," he said. "There's something you need to see." An hour later, Claire was standing outside the old boathouse behind the Donovan property. Ethan waited with a flashlight, his breath visible in the cold air. "I didn't know where else to go," he said, leading her inside. The place smelled of damp wood and oil. In the corner, covered by a tarp, lay a small metal box. Inside were photos Sarah meeting with a man in a dark suit by the lake shore. The timestamps were only days before her death. "Who's he?" Claire asked. Ethan hesitated. "I think it's one of Dad's clients. But I've seen him before. He came here once, late at night." Claire's pulse quickened. "You sure?" Ethan nodded slowly. "He threatened her." The detective stared at the photos, her gut tightening. This wasn't a drowning. It wasn't even just a family tragedy. This was a message, a warning from someone who had something to lose. And now, whoever killed Sarah Donovan was still out there, watching the lake that had swallowed their secret whole. The rain hadn't stopped since they pulled Sarah Donovan's body from the lake, as if the sky itself refused to let the town breathe. Detective Claire Monroe stood under her umbrella, staring at the photograph she'd taken from the metal box. Tall, clean-cut, standing too close to Sarah, his face turned just enough to catch the light. There was confidence in his posture, but also something predatory, like a wolf in tailored clothes. Back at the station, facial recognition returned a name: Gregory Hale, a corporate lawyer from the city, formerly on retainer for Robert Donovan's firm before the embezzlement investigation began. He had vanished from public record 3 months earlier, the same time Sarah started withdrawing large sums of cash. Claire's instincts screamed that this wasn't a coincidence. She found Robert in his office, papers piled high, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. When she placed the photo in front of him, his reaction was immediate: a twitch in the jaw, a subtle step backward. "You know him," she said quietly. Robert hesitated, then sighed. "Gregory handled our clients' offshore accounts. He was brilliant. Until he wasn't. The board suspected him of cooking the books. But the evidence disappeared. Sarah said she'd handled it." Claire tilted her head. "Handled it? How?" Robert's voice cracked. "She said she'd met with him, convinced him to walk away. I believed her." The detective folded her arms. "You didn't wonder why your wife was meeting another man by the lake at night?" Robert's face hardened. "She was my wife, detective. I trusted her." Claire stared at him for a long moment, then said quietly that trust might have killed her. That evening, she returned to the lake house, her flashlight cutting through the rain. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind through the broken shutters, felt like a whisper from the dead. She was about to leave when something caught her, a faint glint beneath the floor near the study desk. Kneeling down, she pried open a loose board and pulled out a small voice recorder, its metal casing damp and cold. The timestamp on the last recording matched the night Sarah died. She pressed play. Static filled the air, then Sarah's trembling voice: "Gregory, please, you don't understand. I can't keep lying for you. Robert's asking questions, and Ethan, he suspects something. If this comes out, we all go down." Then a man's voice, calm but sharp: "You'll keep quiet. You owe me that much." A crash followed, then silence. Claire's pulse quickened as she stopped the recording. This wasn't just a blackmail scheme, it was leverage gone wrong. She sealed the device in an evidence bag, whispering, "You just told me who killed you." But the case took a darker turn the next morning. Ethan arrived at the station, pale and anxious, clutching a crumpled letter. "It was taped to my car," he said, voice trembling. The letter was typed on plain paper. She wasn't the only one who lied. Don't dig deeper, or you'll end up where she did. No signature, no return address, but the words were enough to make Claire's skin crawl. Someone was watching them, someone who knew every step of the investigation. She put Ethan in protective custody, but his fear lingered. "It's him, isn't it?" he asked quietly. "Gregory." Claire didn't answer, but her silence said enough. That night, she sat in her car, overlooking the lake, listening to the recording again, analyzing every sound. Between Sarah's words and Gregory's reply, she caught something fainty, low humming, mechanical, rhythmic. She replayed it, isolating the noise. It wasn't a boat engine or traffic. It was something closer generator. And there was only one place near the lake that used one that size. The abandoned maintenance cabin on the North Shore. Claire called for backup, but drove ahead alone, her headlights slicing through fog and rain. When she reached the cabin, the generator was still running, its steady thrum echoing through the trees. The door was ajar. Inside, the air smelled of oil and decay. A workbench stood against the far wall, covered in tools and blood. In the corner, she found a cell phone buzzing faintly in a puddle. Its screen cracked, flashing a single name, Robert Donovan. Claire's heart stopped. The phone belonged to Gregory Hale. She picked it up, and as she did, the screen lit with a new text message. "You shouldn't have come alone." A sound creaked behind her. She spun around, gun drawn, but the doorway was empty, only the sound of rain tapping the tin roof. Yet she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that she wasn't alone. The hunter had just become the hunted. The storm howled like a living thing as Detective Claire Monroe stood in the doorway of the old maintenance cabin, her flashlight beam slicing through the dark, catching dust, rain, and the faint glint of tools that hadn't been touched in years. The hum of the generator vibrated through the floorboards, a low metallic growl that made the walls tremble. She could feel eyes on her, that instinct every seasoned investigator learns never to ignore. Claire's gun remained steady as she moved forward, her boots crunching over wet gravel. The workbench told a story written in crimson, smeared blood, a shattered coffee mug, and a torn scrap of fabric, silk, pale blue, the same shade Sarah Donovan had been wearing in the photos from her last day alive. She bagged it carefully, heart pounding, when something flickered to life on the far wall, a monitor. It wasn't connected to power, yet static danced across the screen before an image formed, the inside of the lake house study, time-stamped 1 week before Sarah's death. Sarah sat at the desk, whispering into her phone. A man's voice answered, but the video distorted before revealing his face. Claire's pulse spiked. Someone had been watching the Donovans, recording them, manipulating every move. Then, suddenly, a voice echoed from behind her. "Looking for me, detective?" She turned sharply. The silhouette of a man stood in the doorway, tall and soaked, face hidden beneath the shadows. "Gregory Hale," she said, leveling her gun. "Step away from the door." The man laughed, low and bitter. "You think I killed her? You've got it all wrong." "Then help me understand," Claire snapped. "Why was your phone at the crime scene?" His eyes gleamed in the light. "Because she called me the night she died. She said Robert had found out everything. She begged me to meet her here. But when I arrived, she was already dead." Claire studied his face. "And you just left her?" His expression hardened. I tried to call for help, but someone was already there. Before she could ask who, a shot rang out from the trees, splintering the cabin door. Gregory dove behind the generator, shouting, "They found us." Claire fired back, the muzzle flash illuminating the rain. Two figures moved in the dark outside, their footsteps circling like wolves. Claire ducked low, grabbing Gregory's arm. "This way," she hissed, pulling him toward the back exit. They stumbled through the mud, rain lashing their faces until they reached her car. Bullets pinged off the hood as she started the engine and tore down the flooded dirt road. In the rearview mirror, the cabin glowed with fire. Someone had torched it. Gregory coughed, clutching his side. "You don't get it, detective," he gasped. Sarah wasn't innocent. None of them were. Robert made her take the fall for his crimes. She wanted out, but they wouldn't let her. Claire glanced at him sharply. "So you're saying Robert killed her?" "No," Gregory said, blood trickling from his hand. "I'm saying someone else did. Someone working for him." She frowned. "You have proof." He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small flash drive smeared with blood. "Everything's on here. Emails, transfers, surveillance files. But there's one file you need to see, the one Sarah recorded before she died." They reached the edge of town just as police sirens wailed in the distance. Claire pulled over near an abandoned gas station, checking Gregory's wound. "You need a hospital." He shook his head weakly. "No hospitals. They'll find me." "Who's they?" she demanded. He met her gaze with haunted eyes. "The same people who killed Sarah." She exhaled sharply. "Then give me names." He started to speak, but his body went rigid. A single red dot danced across his chest, then a muffled gunshot cracked the air. Gregory fell backward, lifeless, the flash drive rolling from his fingers into the mud. Claire ducked behind the car, returning fire, but the shooter was gone before backup arrived. Rain poured down harder, blurring the flashing lights of the patrol cars that arrived minutes later. Officer Daniels ran to her. "What happened?" Claire picked up the flash drive, now streaked with mud and blood. "He had evidence," she said quietly. "Someone didn't want me to see it." She looked back toward the dark road, her reflection shimmering in the puddles. "This isn't about one murder anymore. It's a cover-up, and I just became their next target." The next morning dawned gray and hollow, the kind of light that made everything look like a faded photograph. Detective Claire Monroe sat alone in her office, the flash drive sealed inside an evidence bag on her desk. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Gregory Hale collapsing in the rain, his last words swallowed by thunder. She turned the small drive over and over in her hand, her only thread in a web of deceit that seemed to stretch far beyond one family's tragedy. Plugging it into her computer, she watched as a single encrypted folder appeared, S_Donovan_truth. Her fingers hesitated before entering the forensic bypass key. The screen flickered, then came alive with dozens of files, bank statements, offshore account logs, emails between Robert Donovan and city officials, and one folder marked Recordings. Inside were 3 video clips, each time-stamped within days of Sarah's death. The first showed Robert pacing his office, shouting into his phone, "I told you to handle it quietly. If this leaks, we're all finished." The second showed Sarah crying at her vanity, whispering, "He's making me take the blame." If anyone finds out, I'll be ruined. The third video froze Claire's blood. It showed the lake, filmed from a hidden camera. The angle shook as if placed on a tree branch. Sarah appeared, coat pulled tight, looking around nervously. Then headlights flared in the distance, and she turned, gasping, "What are you doing here?" Before the screen went black, Claire replayed the clip, freezing the frame just before the lights appeared. Zooming in, she caught a faint reflection in the water, the front grille of a black SUV, checking traffic cam logs. She found that only one such vehicle had passed the North Road that night, registered to Ethan Donovan. Her pulse quickened. Robert's son, the same young man who had begged her for protection. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling, connecting the dots. What if Ethan had discovered the affair between his stepmother and Gregory? What if rage had driven him to the lake that night? The thought curdled in her stomach. Yet the threat letters, the hidden surveillance, the shooter in the woods, none of that fit a simple family feud. Someone else had orchestrated this chaos, and Ethan might be both pawn and perpetrator. Claire drove to the Donovan mansion that afternoon. The house loomed, silent, curtains drawn, the air thick with unease. Ethan answered the door, eyes shadowed, movements jittery. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "They're watching." She stepped inside. "Who's watching, Ethan?" He avoided her gaze. "The ones my father worked for. The ones who paid him to move their money through fake charities. Sarah found out. That's why they killed her." Claire's voice softened. "And Gregory? He tried to protect her," Ethan said, trembling. "But when she died, they blamed him. He ran. He thought he could expose them." She studied him carefully. "And the SUV by the lake, that was yours." His jaw tightened. "I went there to stop her. I wanted her to tell the truth. But when I got there, she was already dead." He sank into a chair, hands shaking. "Then someone called me. A voice I didn't recognize. He said if I told anyone, I'd end up like her." Before Claire could press further, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." She looked up. "Ethan, do you have security cameras here?" He shook his head. "No. But sometimes I hear clicks on the phone line. I think they're listening." A cold wave of dread washed over her. "Pack a bag," she ordered. "You're coming with me." But before they could leave, glass shattered across the room. A bullet tore through the wall, inches from Ethan's head. Claire drew her gun, shoving him behind the counter. More shots followed, precise and controlled. Someone was outside, someone who didn't want them leaving alive. She crawled toward the window, peeking through a shattered edge. A figure in a black raincoat stood beside a car at the end of the drive, rifle steady. She fired twice, forcing him to duck behind the hood. Then she grabbed Ethan's arm and sprinted toward the back door. They burst into the rain, running through the garden toward her car. Tires screeched behind them. The shooter was following. Claire gunned the engine, fishtailing onto the highway as Ethan clutched the flash. Drive to his chest. Lightning tore across the sky as they sped through the storm. "They'll keep coming," Ethan said hoarsely. "Not until they get what's on this drive." Claire glanced at him. "Then we make it public." He shook his head violently. "You don't understand. If this leaks, it's not just about my father, it's about half the city." Claire stared ahead, rain blurring the windshield. "Then I guess we're not just solving a murder anymore," she muttered. were blowing up an empire. The storm had followed them all night, as if the sky itself wanted to bury the truth. By dawn, Claire and Ethan were parked in the basement garage of an abandoned courthouse on the outskirts of the city. The car engine ticking softly in the damp air. The flash drive lay on the dashboard between them, still streaked with dried blood. Claire's mind churned through everything she had uncovered: Sarah's secret recordings, Gregory's murder, the financial trails. It was no longer a family tragedy. It was a networking, invisible system of people who used the Donovans to launder money and erase problems. She called the only person she trusted outside the department, Sergeant Louis Grant, her old partner who'd retired early after being burned by a corruption case. "I need a favor," she said when he answered. "It's big," Grant sighed. "You always did have a taste for trouble." "Where are you?" "Off the grid," she said. "And I need you to stay that way." An hour later, his rusted truck rolled up beside them. He was older now, slower, but the spark in his eyes hadn't dimmed. "Who's the kid?" he asked. "Ethan Donovan," Claire said. "His stepmother was murdered. His father's company runs a fake charity ring that's funneling millions offshore." Grant whistled. "You planning to bring that down with one flash drive?" "If it's the right one," she said. They drove to Grant's safe house, a cabin buried in the woods where old case files still lined the walls. Claire plugged in the drive and mirrored the contents to a clean, hard disk. As the files opened, they revealed a spreadsheet of transactions, dozens of shell companies, feeding into a single offshore account under a name that made Claire's stomach drop: Avery Cole, the current chief of police. Ethan blinked. "That's your boss." Claire nodded grimly. "And now we know why every lead was blocked." She paced the floor. Cole must have used Robert Donovan's firm to move the money, and when Sarah found out, she became a liability. Grant rubbed his chin. "So the lake wasn't random. That's where they clean house." Claire turned to Ethan. "Your father's still alive, right?" He nodded slowly. "He's been in hiding since the night of the murder. I think he's scared of them too." "Then he's the key," she said. "We need to find him before they do." Ethan hesitated. "There's one place he might go: the old family cabin near Ridgepoint Lake. My parents used to take me there as a kid. It's off the grid." Grant checked his watch. "We should move before dark. If Cole's people know you're still breathing, they'll sweep every back road between here and there." They left the city, sticking to forgotten highways and dirt trails. As they neared the lake, Claire noticed a drone high above the tree line, its red light blinking. "We've been spotted," she muttered. Grant slammed the accelerator, sending dust and gravel flying. The drone tracked them for miles before vanishing into the fog. When they finally reached the cabin, the door was already open. Inside, Robert Donovan sat by the fireplace, a pistol on the table and a bottle of whiskey half empty. His eyes were sunken, his hands trembling. "I knew it would end like this," he said quietly. Claire stepped forward. "We're not here to arrest you, Robert. We just need the truth." He laughed bitterly. "The truth. That word doesn't mean much in our world anymore." She showed him the flash drive. "Your wife died trying to expose this. If you care about what's left of your family, you'll help me finish it." Robert's gaze flicked to Ethan. "You should have stayed away, son." Ethan's voice shook. "She didn't deserve what happened to her." Robert's face hardened. No, she didn't, but she made choices that got us all trapped. Cole had us laundering campaign funds for years. When Sarah wanted out, he ordered her silenced. Gregory tried to protect her, but he didn't know who he was up against. Claire leaned closer. And the man at the lake. Who pulled the trigger? Robert stared into the fire. Cole's enforcer. They call him the broker. He doesn't leave witnesses. Suddenly, a branch snapped outside. Claire drew her gun. We're not alone. Before anyone could react, a flashbang exploded through the window. Smoke filled the cabin as masked men burst in. Grant fired back, shouting, "Go! Get the drive out!" Claire grabbed Ethan and dove through the back door, bullets tearing through the walls. They sprinted toward the trees, rain and smoke blending into chaos. Behind them, the cabin erupted in flames. Ethan screamed, but Claire held him back. If we go back, we die too. She shoved the drive into her pocket. He just bought us time. Let's not waste it. They reached the road just as sirens echoed in the distance, not rescue, but pursuit. Claire started the car, mud splattering the windshield. We're running out of places to hide, Ethan said breathlessly. She tightened her grip on the wheel. Then we stop hiding. The road twisted through the forest like a scar, the tires hissing on wet asphalt as Claire drove through the fog with Ethan slumped beside her, his face pale and streaked with ash. The fire from the cabin still burned in her rearview mirror, a dying light devouring the last trace of Robert Donovan's secrets. She wanted to stop, to grieve, but there was no time for that. Every second meant the difference between staying alive and vanishing like everyone else who had crossed Chief Avery Cole. The flash drive in her pocket felt heavier with each mile. Not just a piece of evidence now, but a weaponer-loaded gun pointed at the heart of the city's corruption. Where are we going? Ethan asked, voice raw. To someone who still believes in justice, she said. That someone was District Attorney Lena Marks, a woman who'd spent her career fighting political rot, though Claire knew trusting anyone at this point was a gamble. They reached her office before dawn. The streets were eerily empty, the city drowned in fog and sirens far off in the distance. Claire led Ethan inside through the service elevator, taking every precaution. When Lena appeared, she looked exhausted but alert, her sharp eyes flicking between them. "You look like hell," she said. "You should see the other guys," Claire replied grimly, handing over the flash drive. "Everything we've been chasing, it's all here." Lena plugged it into her laptop, scanning the files in silence. Her expression shifted from disbelief to horror. "These are municipal payroll records, shell contracts, property deeds, half the council's on the take. Cole's been funneling money through Donovan's firm for years, using city contracts as cover." She looked up. "This could take down half the department." Claire nodded. "If we live long enough to release it." Lena exhaled slowly. "We'll go through official channels, but we'll need protection." Claire shook her head. "No more channels. Cole owns them all." She glanced at Ethan. "We leak it. Anonymous, upload, media blast, everything at once." Lena hesitated. "That's dangerous." "So is silence," Claire said. "Sarah Donovan died for this. So did Gregory. Maybe Robert. I'm not letting that be for nothing." Lena agreed reluctantly and began encrypting the upload, setting it to transmit to every major news outlet at sunrise. But before the progress bar hit 50%, the lights flickered. The power cut out. Claire's hand went to her gun. "They're here." Gunfire erupted in the hallway. Glass shattered. Lena ducked behind her desk, shouting, "Third floor entrance." Claire grabbed Ethan and moved him behind a file cabinet. Two men in tactical gear stormed the room, rifles raised. Claire fired twice, dropping one instantly, then lunged for cover as the second unleashed a burst across the wall. "We're pinned," Lena yelled, trying to grab her laptop. Claire motioned for her to stay down, then rolled across the floor, grabbed the fallen guard's weapon, and fired through the smoke. The gunman fell. Sirens wailed against police backup, but Claire's gut told her they weren't allies. "We've got to move," she said, pulling Ethan toward the stairwell. Lena followed, clutching the half-uploaded drive. They raced down the concrete steps as footsteps thundered above them. On the second-floor landing, they nearly collided with a uniformed officer. He raised his gun, then froze. It was Sergeant Grant, bloodied but alive. "You think I'd let them finish without me?" he grinned. Claire exhaled. "You're supposed to be dead." "Been dead before," he muttered. "Get moving." They burst out the back door into the alley, rain pouring again like the sky was washing away the city's sins. Grant covered them as Claire started the car. "We need a safe line to finish the upload," Lena shouted over the rain. "There's one place left," Claire said, turning onto the highway. The old broadcast tower at Fairview Hill. The drive was a blur of flashing lights and distant sirens. Ethan stared at the city skyline growing smaller behind them. "If this goes out, they'll come for us." Claire tightened her grip on the wheel. "Then they'll have to find us first." When they reached the tower, the rain had eased into mist. The metal structure loomed like a skeleton against the dawn. They climbed to the top floor of the control shack, connecting Lena's laptop to the signal transmitter. 2 minutes, Lena said. "Then it's out." Claire stood at the window, scanning the forest below. The quiet was wrong. Too still. "They're already here," she whispered. Headlights emerged from the trees, black SUVs surrounding the base of the tower. Dozens of men spilled out, guns drawn. "We're out of time," Grant growled, cocking his rifle. Claire looked at Ethan. "You wanted to finish what your mother started. Now's your chance." He nodded, fear and resolve warring in his eyes. "Let's end this." The first light of morning crept over the horizon, turning the mist around the broadcast tower into a ghostly shimmer. Inside the control shack, the air was thick with static and adrenaline. Claire watched the upload timer on the laptop crawl toward completions, 71%. Then 72 each second, dragging like a heartbeat before execution. Outside, the men in black tactical gear fanned out around the tower base, their movements precise, silent, methodical. The lead SUV door opened, and out stepped Chief Avery Cole, wearing his crisp uniform. As a man walking into a press conference instead of a firefight. His voice crackled through a loudspeaker. "Detective Monroe," he called, his tone almost courteous. "I suggest you hand over the evidence before someone else gets hurt. You can't win this." Claire leaned toward the window, shouting back, "You already killed too many people trying to bury the truth, Cole. It ends today." Cole smiled faintly, raising his hand. "You always were stubborn. Shamet could have been your promotion day." He turned to his men and gestured sharply. A gunshot shattered the calm, striking the metal railing inches from Claire's face. Ethan ducked, clutching the laptop as sparks flew from the console. "We're losing power," he yelled. "They've hit the generator." Claire swore under her breath. "Grant, cover the stairs. Lena, reroute the power to the backup line." Grant took position at the door, firing in controlled bursts as bullets tore through the walls. Lena's fingers flew across the keyboard. "I can keep the upload alive for 5 minutes tops. That's all we need," Claire said. "RELOADING. Outside." Cole's men began scaling the tower, their ropes slicing through the fog like spider silk. Grant gritted his teeth. "They're coming up both sides." Claire fired out the window, dropping one climber, then ducked as another bullet smashed through the glass. The air reeked of gunpowder and rain. Ethan crawled toward the backup console, shielding the laptop with his body. "Upload at 88%, he shouted. Grant took a hit to the shoulder, but kept firing. "Don't let them breach the door." The pounding grew louder, closer. Claire knew they had maybe 2 minutes before they were overrun. She turned to Ethan. "If they get in, you grab that drive and run. Don't look back." He shook his head fiercely. "I'm not leaving you." She almost smiled. "Then don't get killed." The door splintered. Smoke grenades rolled across the floor, filling the room with choking haze. Flashlights cut through the fog, followed by gunfire. Claire moved through the smoke like a shadow, firing twice, then again, the recoil numbing her arm. One assailant fell, another dropped his weapon, chaos erupting in every corner. Lena screamed as a stray bullet tore past her, clipping her arm, but her hand never left the keyboard. 97%, she gasped. Cole's voice echoed from below. "You can stop this, Claire. I'll make sure your death means something." "You don't get to rewrite history," she shouted back. "Not this time." She ducked behind a console as a grenade rolled across the floor. Grant kicked it away, the blast rocking the shack. The tower lights flickered wildly, then steadied. "Upload complete," Lena screamed. The laptop chimed the files were gone, transmitted to every news outlet in the country. Claire froze, the realization sinking in. "It's done," she whispered. "It's out." The room went eerily silent for a heartbeat, as if even the storm paused to listen. Then chaos returned. Cole's men breaking through the final barrier, bullets tearing through glass and metal. "Time to go," Grant yelled, grabbing Lena and dragging her toward the stairwell. Claire fired one last volley, covering their escape, before turning to Ethan. "Move." They sprinted down the steel stairs as fire spread from the generator below. The tower groaned under the weight of damage and heat. Cole stood at the base, fury etched into his face, his pistol raised. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled. Claire aimed back, unflinching. "It changes everything." They fired simultaneously, his bullet grazing her side, hers hitting his shoulder. He staggered, falling against the SUV as flames erupted around them. Claire and Ethan dove into Grant's truck just as the tower's top section collapsed in a shower of sparks. The explosion lit the forest like sunrise, debris raining down as they sped away. The radio crackled alive, voices shouting from every frequency: news anchors, police dispatchers, and reporters flooding the airwaves with breaking headlines. "Corruption scandal erupts at City Hall. Chief of police implicated." Ethan stared out the window, dazed. "It worked," he whispered. Claire pressed a hand to her bleeding side, managing a grim smile. Yeah, but it's not over yet. Behind them, the tower burned like a monument to truth, fragile, defiant, unstoppable. Rain poured down in relentless sheets as the sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence heavy enough to crush the breath out of the forest. The wreckage of the broadcast tower still burned on the horizon, its smoke twisting skyward like a dying signal to anyone still watching. Claire pressed her hand against her wound, blood soaking through her shirt, but she didn't stop running. Every step splashed mud up her legs as Ethan and Grant struggled behind her, helping the barely conscious Lena through the underbrush. The storm had turned the forest into a maze of shadows and broken branches. Every sound amplified: a branch snapping, a distant engine, the metallic click of a weapon being reloaded. "They'll be sweeping this whole area," Grant muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "We need a vehicle, or we're dead." Claire pointed toward the dim flicker of light through the trees, a ranger's cabin half hidden under moss and rain. "There," she whispered. They crashed through the door, dripping water and smoke, the old wooden planks creaking under their boots. Ethan dropped the laptop on a dusty table, its screen still glowing with the message. "Upload successful," data mirrored across network for the first time. The weight of what they had done sank in. The evidence: corruption, money laundering, and murder was now public knowledge. Cole's empire was crumbling, but Claire knew better than to celebrate early. Men like Avery Cole didn't vanish quietly. "He'll come for us," she said, loading a new clip into her pistol. "He'll want to control the story before it buries him." Grant slumped against the wall, wincing at his shoulder wound. "The city's already burning. Half the department turned their badges in. The rest are on lockdown." Lena, pale and trembling, stared at the rain beating the windows. "You think he'll find us?" Claire looked at her with grim certainty. "He's too proud not to." And she was right. 10 miles away, Cole sat in the back of a black SUV, his arm bound in a bloodied bandage, fury smoldering in his eyes. The news broadcast played on the vehicle's small monitor, showing his face under the headline, "Police Chief Implicated in Cover-Up and Homicide." He turned to his driver. "Find them. I don't care how many men it takes. I want her alive." The driver nodded silently, and the SUV roared into the storm. Back at the cabin, the tension grew unbearable. The group had barricaded the doors, doused the lights, and wrapped Lena's arm in gauze. Claire sat by the window, watching the road below through the scope of her rifle. Every flash of lightning revealed new shapes in the fog, trees swaying, shadows shifting, but nothing yet. Ethan broke the silence. "What if we release the second drive?" Claire turned sharply. "No, that file's a dead man's switch, goes live only if we don't check in every 12 hours. That's our insurance." He nodded, though his eyes betrayed fear. "What if they kill us before that?" Claire didn't answer. Instead, she stood, pulling a map from her pocket. "We head east before sunrise. There's a safe route through the quarry. After that, we disappear." Grant scoffed. "Disappear? After blowing the biggest corruption case in the country? You'll be hunted for the rest of your life." Claire gave him a tired smile. "Then we'd better stay one step ahead." Hours passed. The rain eased into a whisper, and fatigue settled over them like fog. Ethan drifted to sleep at the table, his head resting beside the humming laptop. Claire stayed awake, her gun within reach, her mind replaying every choice that led them here. She remembered the first file she'd opened, the first lie she'd uncovered, the first order from Cole that didn't make sense. The truth had cost her everything, her badge, her safety, her faith, but she'd chosen it anyway. Outside, a faint rumble grew louder. Headlights sliced through the mist. Claire's pulse spiked. "Everyone up," she hissed. "They found us." The cabin exploded with motion. Grant grabbing his rifle, Lena limping to cover, Ethan slamming the laptop shut. Tires screeched outside. The first bullet shattered the window. Claire dropped behind the table, firing back into the dark. "Move out the back," she shouted. They scrambled through the kitchen, into the wet night, gunfire echoing behind them. A bullet tore through the doorframe inches from her head. She fired blind toward the lights and saw one of Cole's men fall. They dashed into the forest again, breath ragged, mud splattering, the sound of pursuit growing closer. By the time they reached the ridge above the lake, the sky was glowing faintly with the first hints of dawn. The city below flickered with chaos news drones hovering, emergency sirens wailing, and every channel replaying the same scandal. Claire looked down at the reflection of the burning tower, still mirrored on the lake's surface. "This is where it ends," she whispered. Behind her, Grant asked, "You mean for him or for us?" She chambered around, eyes locked on the road winding up from the valley. "Whoever's slower." The pale light of dawn spilled across the ridge, washing the forest in silver as the echoes of the chase rolled up from the valley below. Claire crouched behind a fallen tree, rainwater dripping from her hair, the cold biting through her soaked jacket. The air smelled of smoke, oil, and blood, an unholy mix of truth and consequence. Behind her, Grant steadied his rifle with one good arm. Lena pressed against the rocks, pale and exhausted, while Ethan clutched the encrypted drive like it was a heartbeat keeping them alive. The faint hum of engines climbed closer, headlights flickering through the trees like hungry eyes. Claire peered through the scope of her gun and saw them, 3 black SUVs snaking up the muddy road, soldiers spilling out, disciplined and silent. At their center stood Avery Cole, his uniform torn, one arm in a sling, his expression carved from ice. "This is it," Grant whispered, his voice raw. "We make a stand or die running." Claire exhaled slowly. "Then we stand." The first bullet tore through a pine tree inches from her head, followed by a storm of gunfire. The forest erupted in chaos, mud splattering, bark exploding, and echoes bouncing off every rock and root. Grant fired back in bursts, dropping 2 men before ducking for cover. Lena, despite her injury, managed to reload and return fire, her face pale but steady. "They're flanking left," she shouted. Claire spun, firing twice into the brush, the recoil jarring her wound but keeping her alive. Ethan crawled to a rock outcrop, connecting the laptop to a satellite uplink. "What are you doing?" Claire yelled. "Backing up everything again," he said. "If we die, this doesn't." Cole's voice boomed through a loudspeaker from below.com and venomous. "Detective Monroe, you can't win this. The system doesn't fall in a day. You're just making yourself a martyr." Claire gritted her teeth, shouting back, "Maybe that's what it takes to wake people up." Cole laughed, the sound cold as the rain. "You really think anyone cares who you are? They will when they see your face beside the bodies you buried." The firefight intensified, bullets sparking off wet rock, A grenade landed nearby, rolling through the mud before exploding, showering them with dirt and splinters. Grant went down hard, groaning. "I'm hit," he gasped. Claire dragged him behind a fallen log, pressing a hand to his wound. "Stay with me, Grant. You still owe me that drink," he muttered, forcing a grin. Another explosion shook the ridge, trees cracking and falling. Cole's men were advancing fast, their black uniforms cutting through the fog. Claire reloaded, fired again, then looked toward the lake below. "We can't hold this ridge," she said. "We fall back to the docks." Lena nodded weakly. Ethan grabbed the laptop, slinging it over his shoulder. "The signal's still transmitting," he said. "It's in the cloud now. Even if they kill us, it's everywhere." Claire managed a grim smile. "Then we've already won." They sprinted down the slope, bullets chasing them through the trees. Cole's men followed, relentless, their shouts echoing like thunder. When they reached the edge of the lake, the mist was thick enough to hide in, but not enough to stop a bullet. The old wooden dock creaked under their weight. Claire turned, firing until her gun clicked, empty. Cole emerged from the mist, pistol raised, his face twisted in rage. "You destroyed everything I built," he roared. "You destroyed yourself," Claire said, her voice steady. "All I did was show them who you really are." He stepped closer, the water lapping at his boots. "You think truth matters? In a week, they'll forget your name. Then I'll make sure they remember how you ended." She raised her gun, but before she could fire, Cole shot first. The impact threw her backward into the lake, cold water closing over her as the world turned silent. Ethan screamed her name, diving in after her, bullets ripping through the surface. Lena fired wildly, forcing Cole to duck, but the chaos was unstoppable. Sirens now approaching from the far road, helicopters slicing through the dawn fog. Cole turned to flee, but a single shot cracked across the lake. Grant, bleeding and half-conscious, had fired his last bullet. Cole collapsed at the water's edge, staring blankly at the sky as the sound of sirens grew louder. Ethan pulled Claire from the water, coughing and gasping. She was alive, barely, her eyes fluttering open as the first police drones appeared overhead. "It's done," he whispered. "The whole world knows." Claire looked up at the rising sun cutting through the fog. Then maybe it was worth it. Her voice was barely audible, but it carried. Moments later, dozens of officers swarmed the scene, not Cole's men, but federal agents. The scandal had detonated across every network. Evidence confirmed, charges filed, resignations flooding the Capitol. By noon, Avery Cole's empire had fallen, and the name Claire Monroe had become a symbol of justice in a broken system. She stood on the dock, bloodied and shaking, watching the sun climb higher, its reflection blazing across the lake where the truth had finally surfaced.